Yep, are we good? Right. Okay. Hello, everyone. We're just going to allow a couple of minutes for everyone to filter into the webinar today. So we'll just sit here and
talk amongst yourselves.
yeah, exactly. Now is a perfect time to go and quickly grab a cup of tea or a biscuit or a coffee before we get started.
Other drinks are available.
Biscuits brings us back onto our snack attack from the podcast.
Yeah, we need to.
Yeah. Did you have a favourite still from snack attack? Favourite of all?
Oh, I think I'm going to be honest.
You're going to say fig rolls, aren't you?
No, I was going to say the Orange Club. I was actually going to point out that my least favourite thing of all time was, in fact, the fig roll.
Can't be a custard cream, though, can you? OG.
That is true. We haven't
Custard cream is
on
an
here
OG
yet,
of biscuit. If you agree that the custard cream is an OG, put a thumbs up in the chat.
There's no thumbs. There's no thumbs. Actually, you should try the new Loot.
Oh, they're actually very
They're
good.
incredible.
Yeah. We haven't had them on Snack Attack yet, though, have we? That's the thing.
Well, there's time.
There is time
to come.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, we've got joining folks. Any names we know coming up from folks joining?
Yeah, we've got Aaron behind the camera today. Oh, we've also got Matt behind the camera as well. We've actually got a full production team today. Really, two people with headphones on behind the cameras,
which is necessary because we also have Tom Johnson with us today.
Yes,
who is somewhat of a
wiggling the microphone
liability at the best of times when it comes to technology. So, which is ironic when you work for a tech company.
It's more hardware than it is software. So,
okay.
Right. I think we can get into it now. I've been given the thumbs up from behind the camera. So, hello and welcome to our live webinar today. AI Beyond the Hype, answering the questions you're too afraid to ask, and that ChatGPT doesn't know the answer to either. That's something that Aaron told me to say earlier. So the way the webinar is going to work today, I'm going to ask our resident AI and automation expert, Mr. Daniel Lawrence over here, some common misconceptions and questions that we've received, and Daniel is going to either dispel the myths or he's going to give us an answer to the question. We've also got Tom here today. He's going to be monitoring the live questions that are coming in on the chats, and he's also going to be playing devil's advocate a little bit to Daniel's answers, so really get some interesting points out of him. We've also got a handout today. The QR code, I think, is just up here. So just above Tom's head. So if you scan that, it'll take you through to a form. And if you fill that out, you'll get a handout which has a detailed description of all of the questions that we're talking about today. And for the first 3 people that download that, we will plant a tree in your name. Not in your name, but for you.
Unless your name's Teresa Green, for example.
So, yeah, QR code. Aaron will put a link in the chat as well, which I think he already has. And also, there's some information below on the lower third here as well.
And actually, it doesn't have to be just trees. So
no, there are a few sustainability options out there.
Offsets, avoids, reduces carbon impact, then we'll support the project.
So hopefully you'll learn something today and also contribute towards the sustainability of the planet. Yep. So a win-win.
But that's for the first 3, isn't it?
Yeah, just the first 3. So you want to try and
now.
get your hands on that handout quickly. And Aaron's going to be monitoring that as we go through. So let's get straight into it. We're going to go straight over to the resident AI and automation expert, Mr. Daniel Lawrence, who's the co-founder and CEO of Bots for That. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, Phil.
Lovely stuff. So for the few on the webinar today that don't know what we do you want to just give us a quick breakdown of what we do here at Bots for That?
Yeah, and it's probably fair because we're relatively new to the accounting space, I suppose, in terms of what we're doing. But we've been building and running bots for probably well over 6 years now in the enterprise markets. Our specialism is very much now accounting in the industry. In fact, our goal is a bot for every single accountant, so that every accountant has a full digital assistant to support and collaborate in their day-to-day work, which can help them make their practice more productive, more efficient, which ultimately, through reducing costs and time, makes them more profitable and still allows them to deliver the highest levels of compliance and service to their clients.
Lovely. So I think that perfectly brings us on to the first question. It's one thing that some of the viewers might have come across on our socials. It's you talking about now being the time of the automation first business. But what exactly is that?
I know it sounds like another terrible marketing phrase, right? But it didn't come from marketing. It's I guess the pace of technological change and innovation now is almost probably the fastest we've ever known, and we're in, I call it, the early stages of the automation first era, and that but I mean it's really relating to knowledge work. So it's accountancy, legal, professional services, sales and marketing. It's the automation era of knowledge work, which is, it's catching up in size. The innovation that we're now working on, it's not new. Certainly, knowledge work has been disrupted for probably the last 6 decades. Way back to mainframe computers came out in the 60s. We had the personal computer come out in the 70s with the graphical user interfaces. Got the internet with the 80s, mobile 90s, and then more recently, which the accounting industry will be very, very familiar with, we have the cloud. And I think we're in the new era of change that we're going through now is going to be bots and AI. And that's going to be the new disruptive force that's going to change all knowledge work, not just accountancy, but all knowledge work.
Okay. So you mentioned bots there, obviously. Again, we talk about it quite a lot on our socials, but for the people that don't know, what exactly are bots? So can you break it down for us?
Yeah. So the best way, if you've no idea, never used bots, I mean, a really easy way for finance people to grapple with bots is macros. Because you do a series of actions, you record those actions being done, and you can play them back. That's one way to imagine how a bot works today. But the best way I can explain it, if my mum asked me, well, what the hell is a bot? I mean, and she did, I use an analogy. So the majority of us we either have central heating in our homes, or we're at least familiar with how it works. So you've got a boiler, that's the control unit or the brain. That's connected to bunches of radiators spread around the house. You switch the boiler on, you set the schedule for days and times you want it to switch itself on and off. You set the temperature on the thermostat, and then you've got the little knob things on the side of the radiator. Really technical term, I know, right? And off it goes, right? It comes on, it switches on and off, it gives you heat when you need it and when you expect it. If you think of the boiler as the bot in this instance, right? So the thermostat is the logic and the rules that you apply. And then the radiators are all the different source data. So you've got your systems, your screens, your fields. The bot runs, he switches itself on and off according to the schedule that you set, and also to the rules that you define, which then connects with all your different data sources and performs the defined actions that you want. And off it goes, work gets done. So in real terms, in more sensible terms, you would create a bot that would connect to your accounting or non-accounting systems in your practice. Any number of them. Could be Xero or QuickBooks. It could be, well, someone's just phoning me. Could have sworn I put everything on silent, but that's the world of live. So you connect up your bot with Xero or QuickBooks or Sage. You can connect it up with your pre-accounting tools like your Dext and your auto entries, with your client-facing systems like GoProposals, or your online folders and files and emails, even messaging tools like WhatsApp and Slack and websites. And once you define the rules that the series of steps you want a bot to go through, it connects up, it accesses those systems, it accesses the screens it needs to do, it navigates around by itself, it can read text, images, numbers, characters in order to either review, read them, change them, modify them, update them, and essentially do things in the same way that we do when we're sitting at a screen with a device and a mouse and a keyboard. And that's really the best way to explain a bot. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, is a bot like a tangible thing? Does it sit like I guess like Skynet in Terminator, right? There's this tangible like main house.
Yeah. They're virtual. So they have their own desktop like we do, but it's a virtual desktop. So it lives in a purely digital world. No physicality to them. They typically sit on a virtual machine. That's where they live, which is just a virtual computer desktop, really. That's where they sit. That's where all their applications that they access would be installed. They sit there and they're sitting there ready, waiting to be enabled or activated, which can be, again, on a trigger. So you can hit a button to run a bot, or you can run a schedule so that it always runs at Monday at 9 a.m. or something else.
We-
Okay.
Oh, just getting told off by the production team.
Sorry.
So I think from what you've just said and your answer to that, I think that segues nicely into
Did that answer
AI.
your question? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's always the thing, isn't it? It's like, is this bot just a big computer that's dumped somewhere, and if that building loses power, is the bot just going to cut off or not? But obviously, no.
It's truly distributed. I mean, and that's probably an advantage, like, just from a risk point of view. Having, like, you today, like, since COVID and everything else, we've got people sitting anywhere in the world where you can genuinely have digital workforce sitting literally anywhere in the world digitally, which gives you a lot of advantages. So if you have, on the other side of the world, on the side of the planet, there's economic or environmental forces that make things unaccessible, you can switch to another location, to another geography, and keep things moving, keep things working.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, cool. So I think that segues us nicely into AI. It's obviously a term that's kind of getting slapped over the top of everything at the moment. So I think a myth that we could dispel right now would be to what is AI, and also where does ChatGPT fit into that? Because again, it's something that is getting mentioned all the time with when we're talking about these sorts of things.
It is. It's a bit like slapping turbo on anything in the 80s. That's basically what's happening now, and that's what we used to do. You used to put on toothbrushes, bread. It didn't matter what, just slap turbo on, and it's like, yeah, that's a mark of excellence. Let's do it. Let's buy it. But really, sadly, AI, as it's a really overused term, and it's a shame because it covers such a broad field and range of innovations and technologies. The simplest way that I always describe AI is it's just basically an attempt to mimic or simulate how we as humans think, reason, and make decisions. If bots are the eyes and the hands that are running around doing, the AI is the brain that does the thinking and the reasoning in the background to help sort of direct where those bots do and how they do what they do. But in simple terms, you've got two broad categories of AI. You've got strong AI, which that's the thing that everyone's worried gets achieved, right? Which is general artificial intelligence, indistinguishable from a human in how it acts, works, behaves, reasons, and thinks. And that's the thing that everyone's kind of almost petrified that is going to happen at some point. And some people think it's going to happen in this year. Some people think it's going to happen in 100 years. There's no real consensus on that. The second is weak AI, which is it's a poor term because it implies that it's actually weak, but it's actually most of, if not all of, the AI that we actually have created today is weak AI, including ChatGPT. But that's not to say that it's weak, because it can do a lot of things far better than we can, but there are a lot of things that it can't do better than we can, right? So including, ChatGPT is one of those things. There's some things that I'm sure people will know that it does really well, but there's obviously flaws and there's limitations in how good that sort of thing is. It'll definitely outperform us in some areas, and the great thing about it is it could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it, but it sometimes ends up in very unexpected results. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But it is funny to see how we have changed, from when like ChatGPT first came on the scene, from thinking and predicting, well, that's it, we're done, that's the end of us, that's the end of humans and working with else, to nowadays most people are like, it's just not quick enough now. We've gone full force from one extreme to the next, and it's just either not quick enough or it doesn't deliver the results that you really expect it to. But it's definitely raised I guess the awareness of how it's going to impact knowledge work, which is what we're here to talk about today. It's also raised a lot of ethical, constantly raising ethical decisions and choices for us too.
Yeah, I think that distinguishation, I don't say the word, is really important, because I see a lot of times, especially accountants, they say, me and my clients are using AI, and just there you said there's loads of facets to AI.
Yeah.
There's strong AI, there's weak AI. Do you think it's important for accountants, especially when advising business owners, to really drill down into the different types of AI? Because somebody might be generating profit and loss reports, but at the same time also be running a bot. I'm guessing if they're going, I'm using AI, you're trying to find hit a nail with a sledgehammer almost. You're going to get so many different options that it's going to be confusing.
I think it's important because one thing, you don't want to get duped, right? By someone slapping the AI badge on it and you thinking, great, well, I've got AI. Well, and it might not be actually what you think it is. I think it's important from that point of view to know what you're actually buying and using. I think it's important because your clients will want to know, because they'll want to know where their data is going. I also think it's important, generally with anything AI related and bots related, is it's got to be understandable and explainable. And when you're dealing with using AI to get like future results, forecasts, and stuff like that, you don't necessarily have the ability to explain exactly how those answers have been produced. You can get some insight from it, but it's very difficult to get exactly, depending on what you're using. So I think it's important that everyone is clued up. I think it's important that everyone educates themselves on what it is that they're using, what type of AI, because I think ultimately all practices will need to start. And then this is happening in a lot of companies, but everyone needs to have a sort of, what's our policy? And it sounds a bit boring and dull, but it's an important thing you've got to tackle with. Or how do we treat AI? To what extent? What do we use it for? What do we not use it for? What's acceptable? What's not? The ground rules for it's got to be explainable. It's got to be understandable. How do we use it? I think that's important, and I think more and more practices are going to have to grapple with that. The further along we go, and especially when it gets baked into products that you're using that you're not even aware that it's doing it. I think that's important.
Well, companies have policies for IT, don't they?
Everything, yeah.
So you've got the IT safety policies. Why would you not have one around AI?
Absolutely, yeah. Digital workforce policy,
Exactly, yeah.
Those are sort of things possible.
So that kind of links perfectly into our next question. So why are bots and AI good for accounting?
Yeah, so when it comes to knowledge work, bookkeeping and accounting, it's really the perfect suite of activities for bots and AI, because there's a very high degree of technical expertise required. There's lots of logic and rule-based work. There's lots of manual and repetitive and repeatable tasks involved, which use loads of data, which we know bots and AI love and work well with. And a lot of the outcomes or outputs are also determinable, predefinable. So the other thing is that the high level of skills involved in the profession, or the training and then the high level of skills involved, it sort of ensures that they're never going to have the lowest cost of labor, right, in any service, sort of professional services offering. So there's a bit of a race to the bottom at the moment in terms of pricing, and in terms of how quickly and how low cost can you produce and prepare, accounts and bookkeeping and day-to-day bookkeeping and that sort of stuff. So it's a bit of a race to the bottom. So accountants are always going to have to look at any advantage that's open to them that can move them up the value chain, so they can do more client services, but also keep the cost affordable, which means that they're going to have to really consider any kind of countermeasure. And bots and AI was one of the main levers that they're going to be able to have to pull, and it'll help them avoid the onslaught of that commoditization and the constantly driving down costs of things like compliance and other advisory services.
So the next question we've got here is, it's around accountants already using bots and AI. Why they're using it and what for? And I think more importantly, it's like, how long have they been using it before now? Because obviously right now everyone's like jumping on the bandwagon, aren't they, really? And they're like, oh yeah, we need to be the first to do this. And but that's not really the case, is it, when it comes to this space?
Yes and no. And feel free to jump in it, because I know you've got some experience in this space too. But more accountants than you think, certainly, than most people think, using both bots and AI. Some in the top 100, but also some of the smaller firms, as we know, right? The big four have been using the same bots that we use and have been for again about 6-7 years. I mean, EYs and the likes deployed their first bots years and years ago, and they've been using them ever since, both internally on their own compliance and advisory services, but also for their clients. And with that, they've been able to generate new service offerings and revenue lines as a result of that. So the kind of bots that they use and we use have been out of reach for most, though. Because of the costs and the skills levels involved, they've been generally out of the reach of most people, especially SMEs. But those barriers are dropping and they're becoming more affordable and more accessible now than they probably ever have been. But we're still in the what I call the early adopter phase for bots and AI for accounting for SMEs. We're still in the early adopter phases, but it's a perfect time for really forward-thinking, visionary, innovative practices and firms to get ahead of the curve and gain an advantage before the majority catches on and catches up. So there's a small window of opportunity, and I think the next 18 months is it. After that, I think after 18 months, you're almost going to not find 50% of practices will probably have these kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think there is an awful lot of companies out there, accountants specifically, that they're saying we're already using AI, or my favorite one is we're already looking into AI, but if you used Apple Maps or Google Maps to get to work, you're using AI. So I think the biggest thing for accountants is like where with AI do you start? As you're easy, like Zero came in with cloud technology, and since then we've had an explosion of like TikTok, social media. So getting new ideas and new mindsets is a lot easier. There's a shorter runway, isn't there?
Yeah,
but
there is.
I guess the biggest question, playing devil advocate, is like, great, I've got all these tools here. I can do this. I can do that. It's like, well, where do you start? What's going to have the biggest impact right now to me as an accountant?
Yeah. No, it's you always got to start with a why. You've always got to have a purpose, a single purpose. Like, we want to this, right? And it's usually a core strategic objective. That's always a starting point. But you always start small with bots. You always start small. You pick a single task and you go from there. And the advice I always give is think of the area of your business that's going to need to drive the most change. Now, that might be you, it might be your teams, your talent, it might be your processes, it might be your services, it might be your clients. Just got to figure out where's the sense of most change being driven from. It could be client demand, right? So it could be that your clients demand a lower price and additional advisory services within a reasonable margin of change. It might be something else. It might just be that you know that you're running costs too high. You need to increase your profit from 5 to 7% up to 25-30%, and therefore you need to reduce your operating cost base. Whatever that thing is that's in the top 3 things that your firm needs to achieve, that's where you start with bots and say, well, how do we use bots as an enabler, a strategic enabler to drive change? And it is, you remember that bots and AI is a disruptive technology. So it disrupts it by its nature. So you don't just slap it on and keep everything as it is. You actually fundamentally change. And that's the real opportunity for accounting firms now, is that the early adopters can not just get ahead of the curve. And by that, what I mean is you can fundamentally start to rethink how your practice is going to look over the next 3 to 5 years and ahead of everyone else. So that when things start to move, you're well placed to take advantage of those and exploit those changes. Because competitive forces are coming from all places. They're coming geographically. They're coming from new services. They're coming from AI. Like firms who've never done accounting in their lives are suddenly releasing products. I look at stuff that happens in the US, and the IRS are releasing free self-serve tax returns, right, just through their service. So competitive services and products can come from literally anywhere. The ones who gear up will be the ones who can adapt and adopt and pivot so that their business does continue to thrive.
Okay, perfect. So we've got our why. Okay, we're thinking about it. We've decided we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna try out some bots and AI here, right? One question that we get a lot, I'm pretty sure every time, is around security. So it's around the security of bots and AI. So I think this is kind of 2 different questions. Kind of, it's the security around bots and then the security around AI, because I think it's different answers for each.
Not necessarily. They probably go hand in hand. It's probably the most common question that we get. It probably also has the highest level of myth and misunderstanding. So the thing that I always find funny as well is that people try to or tend to hold bots and AI accountable to a higher standard that we hold ourselves. So we're quite happy to share password 123 with 27 people in the department, but the bot's got to be nailed down NASA standard. It's a little bit, it's a bit of
Yeah.
a difficult one to reconcile. But the short answer is yes, they are incredibly secure, probably more secure than we are. If you think about most cybercrime tactics like phishing and ransomware, they rely on the dumb lump of flesh sitting behind the desk, right? To be a dumb lump of flesh sitting behind a desk. So they rely on us being busy, distracted people who click on and do things that we probably should have thought twice about but didn't. And that ends up in mistakes and errors. And that's where we end up with massive hacks and being held to ransom and stuff like that. That's where things all come. And we're really good at bypassing controls like 2FA, two-factor authentication. We get asked all the time about, can your bots do 2FA? Yes, we can. Do any of your people actually, is the question. And we find out that, most of the time, how many times, right? I'm not going to ask you if you've done this, right? But how many people bypass it? Oh, it just saves me time getting into my system. Yeah, but it's there for a reason. So yes, bots can do two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. They can set and change their own passwords. They can have secret passcodes. They are far more secure probably than we have ever been or probably ever will be. And also I think, ultimately most threats are coming from technology-based threats, right? So why not fight fire with fire? Why wouldn't you use, secure, safe bots that are incredibly limited to what they can do, restricted to what apps they can access, to what screens they can and actions they can commit to, and also to what exactly they're programmed. Back to the radiator and thermostat example. They can only follow what's in there.
Yeah.
The thermostat isn't going to automatically switch the boiler on and go rogue. And there's this thing that people sometimes think, well, bots, they're just going to go rogue. They're just going to go off script and they're going to start accessing systems that we've never asked it to. They're going to go into the bank accounts and down. It's just like science fiction. It's that's the sort of thing that we do. Right, that's the sort of thing that people do. That's the risk. The biggest risk in any business is probably us.
But it kind of comes back to when you were joking about it, but the Skynet thing earlier. Like that's what people think that's what's going to happen, don't they?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because the bot has a parameter, and if it doesn't meet those parameters, it fails its process. As well, humans, I'm like, where's that going?
Yeah, exactly. It's just too intuitive.
It's like 2 a.m. and I'm watching cat videos on YouTube, and I started at reading Sky News. I'm like, how have I got here? It's that analogy, isn't it? One question I've got, and it might be quite a tough question, but I see a lot of technologies out at the moment that, say, for example, invoice comes in to one of my clients. I've then got a AI tool that opens up that email, takes the invoice information, and then maybe puts it in a pay around or puts it in. What happens when you've got like a phishing link that they've sent out a website address for you to click through? As soon as you click through, they've got access to your computer, much like a human would click through. What happens in that process with like a bot or AI?
Well, I guess it depends on two things. One, how you build the bot. A kind of term I always say is it's really easy to build a bot badly. So I think that the good thing that our industry's done with bots, but also it's also a bit of a double-edged sword because it's a bad thing too, is we've made it look easy. Right, I get this all the time when we speak to IT people. They think, "Oh, that looks so straightforward. We can probably do that ourselves." We make it look easy because we're very good at it. We've been doing it for years, and that's what we're good at. So people think naturally, "Oh, that's great. We'll just go out and do it ourselves." And you realize, and we've spoken to firms who've tried and failed to bring this technology on board because they simply didn't have the breadth and depth of skills and knowledge to make it work properly and know how to use the tools. You've got to not just have a programming background. You've got to have a much broader background and depth of experience and skills than that. So anyone can do it badly. So if you build it badly, it doesn't matter what controls you got in place, right? So building it well and safely and against best practices is always the way to go, as with anything. The other thing is always going to come back to what your own internal policies and systems are in place to manage and control, bad actors and cyber attacks, filters that you've got switched on in mails and stuff like that. So it's a combined effect that you need to put in place. The great thing about the bots is you regardless of those filters and controls you've got in your systems, you can define the bot to do very precise things. And if it doesn't meet a very precise set of criteria, then it will stop them. And the great thing is, where we tend to do it is if anyone's unsure, which they normally are, you sort of start off with the most severe, the most conservative approach, and you see what gets stopped by exception. And by exception, you then manage them and train the bot to improve and change. And that's the best approach. And then you end up with a much more refined accurate and compliant process.
So basically, you could build filters and it says, okay, read because this is the thing, like you could get an email from you, for example, Daniel bots for that,
Yeah.
but the A could be a no, and somebody might not clock that. Where a bot, obviously,
it can read it precisely.
It can read that, and I guess it can.
And you can set the 100%, so it has to be 100% confidence. So it must be, every single character must be exactly the same. Things like that are possible.
And I guess as well, obviously, going back to the bot kind of living in this virtual space, creating its own secret codes.
Yeah.
If it did click, say worst case scenario, opened up that link, it's probably not going to gather anything, is it? It should be dead space almost.
Exactly. Yeah. It can open up those things in very safe ways, or access them in very safe ways, safer than we can.
Yeah.
That works very nicely into the next question, which I think you've already covered a little bit, but it's around data. So we see a lot of questions and a lot of people being like, oh, okay, what happens to the data once the bot has it, or like, where does it go? Where is it putting it? Like, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what actually happens when the bot goes into the systems and the data that it uses.
Yeah, it's another great example where we hold the bot accountable to standards higher than we hold ourselves. And we see this in every day, like you can see it in the news all the time with data leaks and things that we make mistakes. That's the bottom line of it. It is another major plus for the bots. We represent the weakest link in any system, unfortunately, and the greatest threat. So most breaches are going to be the result of a human cock-up, unfortunately. The great thing about bots is, we asked already, but like, where do they sit? They're virtual. They sit in a virtual world, in a virtual machine. So the virtual machine sits sort of within the client's network. So if you're an accounting firm using bots, the virtual machine sits within your own connection networks, your own cloud. That's where it does all its work from. So the data stays within your network. It accesses the data, it holds things in temporary memory while it's working on it, a bit like we do, sort of hold things in temporary memory. And then, we forget it, we have a cup of coffee and it's gone. Finishes the task, deletes it, doesn't archive it, doesn't transmit it, doesn't save it, doesn't put it anywhere else other than, again, as part of that defined process, that workflow. And then it's gone. So again, bots don't go rogue. They don't just like go off script. It's again, that's science fiction to think that. So it's very concise. It's very programmable what it can and can't do, and your data is never going to go anywhere other than what you want. Where we want it to go, which is not necessarily the case with AI, depending on what you're using, because AI, by its very definition, to be AI, needs to learn from the data. That data needs to be added to a huge data set, which is with every other piece of data, and learn from it. So it might not necessarily be hackable or accessible, although you only have to look at the recent news to see how many times there have been outages in certain well-known AI platforms, and some of those won't be accidental or just performance. Some of them will be they've been threats or whatever, so they've had to take actions. And you can't control that. If you want to use those tools in the way that they've been prescribed, the data goes there. So you want to do, the way to really go is to create your own data sets that you can use the power of technology to get the best out of it. But you've got to have your data sitting somewhere where it's on your own properties.
So this is a very broad question.
Okay.
But so I think we've kind of covered most of the general questions that we get asked.
Okay.
So try and summarize this one in a short answer if you can, but because this is, you'll see what I mean when I ask this, but what is possible for accountants with bots and AI?
Okay.
Because this is obviously it's an incredibly broad question.
It is. I mean, the easy answer is almost nothing is impossible now. If you'd have asked me 5 years ago, it'd have been different. The technology is continuously improving and expanding. 5 years ago, if you'd have asked me if we could have automated, say, a CCH tool, actions, uploading the stats, the final accounts, closing periods, putting the accounts in, it was trickier, much harder to do. It was possible, but it was much more difficult. Whereas with things like the evolving computer vision, say, that could look at an image and interpret what's on that image, those sorts of things now are easy by comparison. So, and using things like algorithms with the power of the models, the large language models that we've got now, again, were much harder 5 years ago. Took, weeks and weeks of really programming things to get them working. Now you can build things. I mean, just the other day, Christian built something for a client for a proof of concept. He'd finished it in about 25 minutes. That's the level of.
Wow.
Whereas 5 years ago, that probably would have taken 3-4 weeks to get to the same place. So, like I said, at the start, the pace of change and innovation is exponential now. It's faster than we've ever known. So the art of the possible is almost limitless now. There's almost nothing that you can't find a use case for and use in your in your modern day bookkeeping and accounting firm, assuming you've made the transition to cloud. You laugh, but there are still firms out there who haven't actually. They've still got paper. We talked to some recently, so they are still out there. So
yeah. That actually, so one of the questions that we got emailed in was around creating a business case for bots and AI. So you've mentioned a use case there, but how would you go about making a business case for bots and AI?
It's simple. It's just not easy. It's a bit like a client comes to you and says, can you produce my year-end accounts? Here's a box of receipts. It's very simple. It's just not easy because you're going to have to take all those receipts. You're going to sort through them, put them into date, categorize them. It's simple. It's just hard to do, and it's the same thing with a business case, really. The easy thing is to start with the costs. The costs are straightforward. The cost of either your bots or your AI or the time it takes. So that's the first thing. That's the easy part. Once you get then to looking at the savings and benefits that they generate, that's where things get interesting. I always start with the time that you will save when a person's no longer doing the task, because you can quantify and put a value on that. But that's also important because it's 100% saving. So even if it's 5 minutes, there's 100% saving of 5 minutes. So that time is then saved. It's a start point. And then you can start to look at things like efficiency savings. Say the bot might take less time to do things. That has a knock-on effect either upstream or downstream in the process. And that can have a value in itself. And then you can look at savings that might be more qualitative. And this is one of the hardest parts. And we've always had this with enterprise. But eliminating errors and rework, there's the time saved of eliminating errors, but also then doing the rework and correcting it, right? So those are things. Then you've got client satisfaction. But you've got to measure it, whether that's NPS or something else, or maybe it's employee morale and job satisfaction, and then maybe it's attrition or ENPS. There's lots of things that you can do to define what's the benefit value and then put a value on that. It's hard to sometimes value those things, but it is possible. But you'd be surprised the value that can add up with all the savings then versus the cost. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is just putting too much emphasis on the time the bot takes versus the time the human takes. So again, it's like once the time is saved, that time is saved and freed up to do more things. So that in itself has an opportunity value. If you're an accountant, you'll understand what that means, right? So there's an opportunity value of that as well as the time saving. So all these things can be quantified and then put up against the cost. And then you can calculate your ROI, which your return on investment. Now that might be your accounting rate of return, your net present value, IRR, whatever you use. Put that out there, measure it, and say, well, and usually most things have a very high, once you do it properly, most things have a very high return. It's just that most people tend to miss out all of the actual savings and don't put values on the things that really add value. So it's just about getting that right.
And shoot me down here if I'm wrong, but the way I look at it is it's like team Sky cycling, right? Especially with the bot and AI. It's looking at all of those things that take you a minute, 5 minutes. And obviously we work with a lot of the top 100 enterprise size accountancy firms that have hundreds, thousands of clients. If you were to save obviously a minute of whatever it is, say you're publishing a journal, it takes 2 minutes across 500 clients, it's 1,000 minutes.
Yeah.
The idea is that all of a sudden that person that's doing that has 1,000 minutes that if they wanted to grow, they've only got time for 2 proposals. All of a sudden they've got time for 10 proposals.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. It's those minimal marginal gains that then amount to you to going faster or, maybe retiring a little bit earlier.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why you've got to do the ROI properly because, we thought, it's only 2 minutes. Yeah, but we've got, maybe you got 10,000 clients you can apply that to.
Yeah.
But they're the best bits, isn't it? Because I think we can look at, like Xero kind of came in with the cloud technology. And it's like, bam, like, oh my God, this is a huge, like game changer.
Mm.
But actually, it's those little bits that you need to look at that stack up that really.
That's why we always start small.
Yeah.
You never try and go with a massive process to start with.
Quick
You start
wins.
small, a task here, a task there, quick wins, and then you build and you scale from there. Yeah.
Going to be a little bit conscious of time here, but we've
Okay.
still got a few questions, so we'll try and rattle them off a little bit quickly here.
Okay.
So we've got: will bots or AI replace people, accountants or bookkeepers?
Yeah, it's always the most controversial side of bots and AI. It's the question that most people think of but are afraid to tackle. We will probably always have a fear for the negative impacts that technology will have on people. I think it's possible or likely that AI and bots won't have a bigger net impact than any of those disruptive technologies of the last 6 decades that I mentioned. So I think there'll always be some tasks and some jobs or some parts of jobs that won't need to be done by people in the future. But there'll always be new jobs and new tasks that are created as a result of innovations and disruptive change that'll always come with it. And I think also that bots and AI are always going to play a supporting role to us in a lot of ways. We'll probably always keep humans in the loop in some way or some expression of some type, whether it's managing true exceptions or handoffs or things like that. I think it's unlikely that accounting jobs will ever be fully replaced by bots and AI, but it is much more likely that people will lose out to accountants and bookkeepers who know how to get the best out of and use bots and AI. That's a certainty because that's always been the case. The typing pool lost out to people who knew how to use word processors. So there'll always be that element, and that will hold true.
Okay, I think that also fits nicely into the next question, which is: what size of practice or firm do bots and AI best suit?
All. I think until the last couple of years, I said this tech's been out of the reach of most. It's no longer out of the reach. Firms like ours are making it accessible and affordable for everyone, from the smallest micro firms with one person up to the top 20 firms, and we already know the top 4 are using it.
Yeah.
So everyone sort of fifth position downwards, all the way down to the smallest, can use and access these kind of technologies, these bots and these AI now. There's something to suit every size of firm, every level of ambition, and every budget.
If that sounds interesting to you, I'll mention it at the end, but our talk at DAS on the main stage is all about how people go from implementing bots from micro firms all the way up to firms in the top 20. So if you want more information on that answer, just pop along to the talk.
Just to give you a nugget, I think that's what's more important is, are you ready for bots?
Yeah.
That's probably more important, right? So, and the answer to that is probably what your answer was to cloud. You were one of the ones who, as soon as cloud came up, you wanted it. You wanted to bring it into your firm. You wanted to take that early mover advantage. Bots and AI for you now. If you were one of the ones who was more of a late to majority and you wanted to wait and let everyone else figure out all the kinks and the brinks and the breaks and wanted to sit and wait, maybe it's not for you now, maybe in 6 months. And I think that's probably the most important thing, because if you come in expecting one thing, you'll be disappointed. If you come in expecting a fully polished, refined, it's all ready to go, it's not necessarily that, but it's not far off it. So I think you've got to start learning about it. You've got to start preparing for it, considering how you might bring it into your firm, how you might adopt and adapt to it. Now's the time to start doing that. If you're a visionary and an early innovator and adopter, you need it yesterday. You need to get on board now.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? When we talk about AI and we talk about bots, like, as much as we are still learning how it's going to look, AI and the bots themselves are still learning.
Yeah.
So the quicker you get into it and the quicker it learns about your business, your processes,
you're right.
you're going to be so
Streets
much
ahead.
further down the road, because you're just constantly learning. And that's the biggest thing, isn't it? It's rather than going, oh, how will this help my business? It's, how is this going to learn about my business, and what areas do I want it to learn about the most, which should be those little time costs, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the sooner you start using it, the more it learns, the more value you're going to get, the quicker you're going to get it. Yeah.
We've pretty much run out of time now, but we have got a fair amount of questions left.
Okay.
Just remember that if you want to download the handout, the QR code is up here. There's some information in the lower third. All of the questions that we got asked are fully there. Okay, cool. We've had some people sign up to the handout already, so we've
Excellent.
got some
That's Diane.
sustainability
Yeah.
things on the way to you.
Sorry, who was
okay, here
so
we
it's
go.
Diane from
Diane
DCW
from
Accounting.
DCW.
Thank you, Diane. That's great.
Congratulations.
Bianca
Bianca
Evans.
Evans, Knightslow.
Excellent.
Congratulations.
And
Andrew
Andrew.
Valor.
Valor. Andrew.
Well done, Andrew. So you'll all have trees planted in your name,
Well,
right?
we'll get in touch with them.
we will
won't
get in
we?
touch.
We'll sort that out.
Was it in your name?
Yeah, in
or
the
is
name,
it
so
in
we'll-
your
yeah,
name?
yeah.
Somewhere in the
Okay.
middle. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you had a question that we didn't cover, it was probably will be answered within the handout. So QR code up here, the information in the lower third. We will quickly finish on. I know you basically already covered this. One last tiny
Good to
question.
reinforce things, though.
It is. Where do you start with
Okay.
bots? I know you already asked this question, but it's the
Mm.
last question that we've got, and I think it's just a good one to end on.
Okay. All right.
So
So,
if you can quickly summarize that,
okay.
where do you start with
Okay.
bots?
And I'll address the folks. The
Here we
camera.
go,
'Cause
straight
I'm
into
talking
the
to you
camera.
guys. And I've sort of forgot about them. But start with your why. Got to have a why. Your purpose, your objectives. Start with that. Whatever it is, express it, write it down, put a value on it, put a timeline on it. So let's just say you want to reduce operating costs by 25% within 12 months. Starting point is we're going to automate task A. Let's just say bank rec bot, right? We're going to automate bank recs first for one type of client for one bank account. From there, you're going to scale. You're going to then go up to automating 25% of your transactions, your reconciliations, your reports generations. That's the sort of place that you start. Start to quantify it, put it into a little plan, a little statement. That's where you begin. And once you've got that, then you can start to think about how might we actually achieve this? What technologies might we need to use to achieve it? Who do we need to get involved with? Who do we need to partner with? Anything is possible now, though. So many things are possible. There's nothing off the table. It's clean stakes.
Perfect. So that pretty much wraps it up for what we're going to talk about today. However, we are going to be at DAS on the 16th and 17th of April.
Yes, we are.
Platinum partner. I don't know if we've mentioned that before. But,
A few times.
Maybe a few times. So we will have a stand there, C16. If you want to come and have a chat or see the bots in action, we will be demoing them on the day. Yeah. Pop over to the stand, come say hello to one of us. We'll all be there. The whole team will be there. Come over. We'll run you through a demo. We'll have a little chat about some of the questions we've answered here. We also have a talk on day one on the main stage, as I've mentioned earlier, about micro implementation from micro to top 20 firms. We've got two of our partners joining us on stage with that one, Cara and Chris McKenna. We also have a talk on day two, which is at the Tech Academy stage about...
That you and I.
That is you and I.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
should know the...
You
I
should
should
know
this
your,
one. It's top 5 bots that are going to save you 2 days of time across a month.
Yeah.
You should have said
That's-
that surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, or a surprise. And also, we have a knowledge share on the second day with Neil Jackson.
Yeah.
Again, one of our partners, and he's going to be delving into sexy accounting and bringing
Yeah.
it back,
Yeah.
and how he's been able to do
Yeah.
that with the help of bots.
Yeah.
So those are all the things to look out for at DAS. It's going to be a great show. So if you're there, make sure you come say hello.
Indeed.
Make sure you attend the talks. If you don't, you'll be missing out.
Yeah.
Anything else?
And I guess if I were an accountant watching this right now, my mind would probably be exploding with use case questions, further specific questions. If you can't wait until DAS, you can download the web form.
Yeah.
Or in the chat section, just write, email me.
Yeah.
We'll reach out to you and we can answer your questions directly.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I think that's it.
That's it, gents.
We've been the
That's
bots for that team. This has been a live webinar.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you in the next one.
Signing out.
Thanks for coming.
Signing out. Yeah.